I would just reiterate my mom's really good career advice. Find what you love doing and make it your career.
Okay, Susan, thank you so much for joining us on This is Purdue. We're thrilled to have you today.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your background with Purdue. Your mother is very influential in Purdue's history. So tell us a little bit about her and, like I said, your background with the university too.
Sure. So I grew up in West Lafayette. My parents taught at Purdue. My earliest memory of Purdue is going to the Purdue Nursery School.
Oh.
So at about age 2. So we are definitely a Purdue family. My mother has been a trailblazer for women at Purdue University. She was that her entire career. We're talking about 70 years ago, and the world was very, very different. She emerged from graduate school. Well, she went to graduate school at Cornell and got an NSF fellowship to have a free ride to get her PhD. And her major professor pulled her aside and said, "Virginia, you can't take that." And she said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, you'd be taking it from a man, and you're just going to get married and have babies and quit." So that is where we started on this journey. She did take the fellowship, got a free ride, met and married my father, John Ferris. The two of them were lifelong lab partners and best friends. Oh. So when she got pregnant with my older brother, and the department discovered it. And they had to have a faculty meeting to decide if she could come attend the faculty meetings. They decided she could, but she had to wear a big lab coat, so they couldn't see anything. And so the professor who ran the lab said to her, "Virginia, as soon as that baby comes, I need your letter of resignation on my desk, or I will fire you, and that will not look good on your record." So she essentially was forced out of her first job at Cornell. So she and my father made it to the Midwest, first to Illinois, and then my father got accepted as assistant professor here at Purdue University. So women were still, nematologists were thin on the ground, let's put it that way. So my father is a nematologist at Purdue University. He has this wife, and she also is a nematologist by this time, and she has set up a consulting organization in her own name, except her own name is not Virginia R. Ferris, it's V. R. Ferris, so no one knows she's a girl. And so she becomes internationally known as V.R. Ferris, but of course everyone at Purdue University knows that it's John's wife, Virginia. They put up a laboratory in our basement. She bought herself her own microscopes and had this huge consulting opportunity running out of our basement. So she was going to get a 3-year grant from the NSF, but it came on the condition that she get hired or affiliated with Purdue University. And so that was a tough sell, but finally she convinced the department head, but she was paid half of what a male would have been paid in her position because they were already paying my father a full salary. You can't have 2 salaries in one family.
Oh my goodness.
So she becomes an assistant professor at Purdue. They publish, they do research, they do groundbreaking things together. And to my knowledge, she is the only human being in the history of Purdue University who has been made a tenured professor on a part-time status. So she's still being paid half. So she plays hardball and says, you gotta make me a full professor in pay when I go back to the department. So with some grumbling, they did. And so now they're both full professors in the Department of Entomology, and they go from there.
So would you travel with your parents? What was your experience like, growing up on Purdue's campus?
Yes, so 2 things. First, we traveled extensively. My parents studied nematodes, and nematodes are microscopic organisms that live pretty much everywhere. They're very ancient, and so they wanted to collect soil samples and find these organisms, these nematodes. So they preferred old growth areas, places that had not been disturbed. So we went to every single state and national park in the entire country at least once. We pulled a little tiny travel trailer which had soil washing equipment and my mom's microscopes, of course, and they did some calculations on the back of an envelope and discovered how many pounds of soil each of their 2 children could carry in a backpack before they complained too badly. And then they wondered why neither of us went into biology. I don't know.
So looking back, you know, in this era, was your dad ever, what was he thinking about how successful your mom really was? And obviously he was, you know, rooting for her. Like, what were his thoughts around all of this?
Well, they were a team. Inseparable team. They published many, many papers, Ferris and Ferris, and sometimes it would be V. Ferris, J. Ferris, and sometimes the other way around. In fact, one time the department head stormed into their office, their laboratory, and said, "Who is doing what? I never know which of you is doing the work." And the answer was, we're both doing it. So they were very supportive with each other. They were the whole way through. It was a joy growing up the daughter of 2 such passionate scientists who were such close colleagues in and out of the laboratory.
That's incredible. So, like I said, growing up in that Purdue community, are there any specific memories that really stick out to you, you know, with your parents or with your sibling, you know, anything like that?
So my parents were passionate about Purdue athletics,
Okay.
and they had football and basketball tickets, of course, really good seats. And so my brother and I loved going to the games with them. That was a real big part of growing up. But they also had tickets to all the convos that came through the convo series. And I distinctly remember sitting as close to Itzhak Perlman as I am from you, watching his bow work. It was just magical. So, and we did the Christmas show, the Glee Club, everything. We partook of all of the culture that tends to slosh through a college town.
And growing up, you know, when was your first memory of that, being part of that Purdue community?
From day one. I don't remember not being part of the Purdue community, honestly. It was just such a part of the fabric of our lives.
How did you followed in your mom's footsteps, you went to Cornell. Tell us about your journey there and then your career post-graduation.
So my mom's career advice to everyone who would listen, and she mentored thousands of people in her career. She actively strove to mentor young women, of course, but her career advice was find what you love and make it your career. And so that was the career advice she gave my brother and I, and as I've said, neither of us went into biology. But she was very supportive. I went to Wellesley College, as did she, and then I went to Cornell Law School. And it was fun going to visiting the Cornell campus with my parents, having them show me where they met, where they did their research, where everything happened. That was a lot of fun.
You know, I read they were obviously on the East Coast with Cornell, and they moved to the Midwest, which was even more kind of traditional values. What made them want to move to West Lafayette, and were they nervous about that shift?
So my mom had grown up in Abilene, Kansas, which is even farther west than Indiana. My dad had grown up in the greater New York area. So they were pretty much equidistant between their 2 sets of parents, which worked fine for them. So they both grew up with strong values. So moving to the heart of the Midwest was not anything emotionally difficult for them. Quite honestly, they came to Purdue because my dad got a job as a nematologist, and those jobs weren't all that frequent back then.
Okay, that's great. So did your mom and your dad really have like a favorite program or initiative, and probably one that they worked on together, I imagine?
So many things come to mind. Obviously, the work that they did to get a patent for nematode-resistant soybean It is top of list. The Purdue Research Foundation has that patent. Farmers began using that seed corn in the late 2000s and have had higher yields as a result. That's very exciting. But there's so much that they did together and separately. My mom, once once she was part of the administration, they discovered that she was intelligent and reliable, and they could put her on a lot of committees, right? So shortly after she got tenure, they stuck her on a committee that had jurisdiction over the vet school. She was on there with another very smart Purdue woman, and they said to each other, how come there's so few women in the vet school? Mm-hmm. And it's not because they're not intelligent. It's not because they're not doing well in school. We know they are. What's the problem? There is only 10% women in the vet school. And the answer came back, that's our quota for women.
Oh my goodness.
So they got that changed, those two women. And now, incredible. As you know, there's more women than men in vet schools.
Were there any Purdue traditions? I know you said you would go to the convocations, all that kind of stuff. Any like PMO Christmas shows or certain athletics games that were really special to your family?
The Christmas shows were awesome, but the football games just really stand out in my memory. I am an American. I mean, doesn't that just bring chills to yourself when you hear it?
We interviewed Mark Herman
yesterday. Yes, terrific.
And he said the exact same memory. That's so funny. How was it growing up with your mom, who was such a trailblazer, for women? What did she instill in you?
So I have to say that as a child growing up in a family with my own interests, I took her for granted. I took for granted that my parents were internationally known biologists, that they went on summer trips to Ghent or to another country just because they had expertise and people wanted to hear them speak or teach. I just took that for granted. It was great to grow up with it, but the idea that she was doing something novel and new really only hit home to me once I grew up and looked back at the struggles she had and what she had to overcome. So, but she had some very strong traits. Persistence and adaptability, I would say, are key traits for my mom, and she tried to instill those in her children, of course. But in the late 80s, when people stopped looking through microscopes and started looking at DNA, she decided she was going to teach herself about DNA and how to extract it from nematodes. And nobody knew how to do it yet. It was a cutting edge. So she decided that she would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning every single day and study and learn, which she did. And that actually was a habit that continued until the end of her life. And so then the two of them began doing that and, again, produced some remarkable outcomes, including the patent on the soybean.
What does that word persistence mean to you?
To me, persistence means having the desire and the capability to keep going no matter the setbacks, to identify the roadblocks and to go around them, over them, or under them, and not to be put off or stopped because someone else has a different idea for your life.
What do you think your mom did for, other women in STEM, other professors at Purdue, other, women studying all of these amazing things? How did she impact them? And do you still hear stories about it to this day?
I do. So she mentored many, many, many young women over her career. She and my dad were faculty fellows at Earhart Hall for 30 years, and they would go and have dinner or lunch there a couple of times a week, and the women would sit down and they would pour out their heart to my parents, and they would listen and give advice, no nonsense advice, I'm very sure. And sometimes if it was a problem with a professor or a class, they would make a quiet phone conversation, and help things. Mm-hmm. And I have heard, since they passed, I have heard so many stories from so many young women who were from Earhart Hall and remembering those dinners and that advice that they got. But it wasn't just the undergraduates, the graduate students too. She mentored every graduate student that came through the entire program, whether it was her graduate student or not. And I continued to exchange letters and emails with some of her graduate students who are out there in the big wide world.
That must have been so special growing up with that team as parents, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was. They were a team.
Who do you think of when you think of Purdue? Is there any one person, or is it a certain thing that you think of?
I think of it as a composite. I don't think of it as any one person, place, or thing, but I think of the campus as a whole and the vibrant nature of the community spirit at Purdue. That's what I really think about. And you know, we've been in Naples now for a few weeks, and when we first went to the beach, I put on my Purdue ball cap and went walking, confident that I knew no one on that beach. And every third person was, "Boiler up!" Yes, go, Boilers!
That's amazing.
Yes.
What does that spirit and that community mean to you?
That spirit is a spirit of cohesiveness and family and community. I am convinced that the Purdue community is very cohesive and works to support their own. And that's tremendously important in a college community, I think.
Looking back, you know, with your mom, how do you think she would be proud to see Purdue and where we are today?
Well, back in the day when she arrived at Purdue and was being paid half-time for a full-time position, I'm not sure she ever could have known at that point in time that Purdue would be so embracing of all kinds of diversity now. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the dean of the College of Agriculture is a female. That would be unheard of back then in the bad old days. In her time, the dean of the College of Engineering was a female. So the world changed, Purdue changed, it adapted, it embraced. There's been so many talented people come through Purdue University.
Any other stories or anything that I missed?
There are a million stories.
Yeah, maybe like, I know we talked about like your mom's favorite project initiative, maybe something about her you know, if a student really impacted her and she told you about it or came home and was all excited about something one day, anything like that?
So my mother would constantly talk to me after I left home. It was more letters and phone calls, but would constantly talk about how proud she was of her graduate students, or really all of the graduate students. And she had a little ritual, and the department allowed this, of course, which was that the first question asked of someone giving a presentation was always from Virginia Ferris. And Dr. Ferris asked very difficult questions, but she had always talked to the student beforehand and said something along the lines of, look, you're the world expert right now in this particular topic on which your thesis is being built. Don't be afraid to show us how much more than us you know. And I'm going to ask you a hard question, but you're going to answer because you know the answer. And that just made them feel so good. And of course, they rose to the occasion.
That's awesome. What does your mom's legacy and your dad's legacy at Purdue mean to you and your brother?
Well, it's tremendously important. As I said, we established an endowment in their name to continue their name so that younger people who may not have encountered them will still benefit from knowing about the Doctors Ferris, because it's a tremendous story. It's a trailblazing story, but it ended with a wholly different university in terms of acceptance of people of different genders and races, et cetera.
Well, is there anything else you want to tell our listeners, or anything about your parents and that team that they forged at Purdue?
I would just reiterate my mom's really good career advice. Find what you love doing and make it your career. And other than that, boiler up.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we can't thank you enough. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.